And then we get into the service buildings, and then, residential buildings. That's our houses. And that's going to be bound into this 2050. So any CO2 produced in whatever you use in your house, I don't know how they're going to do it, but they're going to force you to use some service to capture that CO2 for any process in your house. Well, everything's going to be over to smart grid, smart meter by then, so it'll pretty much be electrically driven, because you see how they're trying to do away with gas stoves? That's because you'll be outside of that, and you won't be able to capture that methane or whatever gas is CO2 coming out of your natural gas stove or your propane burner. See, that's why they're trying to get everything to electric, because then they can meter it at the source. So wherever the electric is produced, that tax will be associated with you in your consumption. So that is going to be a carbon add-on tax that will pay directly to these companies that are liquefying it and sending it to an underground storage facility. And thank you for joining me for the second part right here, Mini Ice Age Conversations, Brighteon TV, uncensored, every other Friday, 2 to 3 p.m. Before the break, we were talking about Navigator putting in their Heartland Gateway, or Greenway, excuse me, CO2 pipeline through private land, forcing politicians. I would actually go out on a limb and say extreme campaign contributions to everybody involved in this. Because the amount of money that I'll show you is included in this. Now that was the initial. So the red lines are the initial pipelines that are proposed. And they don't really show you where the sequestration facilities are, but if you actually go to their website, they'll show you where the trunk lines are going to come off and the capture facilities. Now a capture facility is where they take the CO2 out of an industrial process, and they're focused on fertilizers and also ethanol production. So those two are, quote, the main that they're focused on to at least run this project right now. So whatever's going to be re-emitted to the environment, they capture it. Now you tell me how much extra power it takes to turn a gas into a liquid and then pump it down the line. Well, they say it's more stable, yeah, but you know, the amount of energy to take a gas to turn it to a liquid, you're creating more of something than you're saving. It seems that this is all just a backhanded way to create more money for corporations and make the citizens pay for it. But each of those yellow dots that you see, or orange, is going to be another facility that has to be built with compressors and just the gamut of industry on top of oil and gas and pipeline infrastructure. And just think about running 1,300 miles of high pressure pipeline. Like how many millions and hundreds of millions of dollars is that going to be alone? Then they have to pay for the easements. And here's the thing, they're going to pay the farmers for the first year at full value of the crops that they're going over that obviously they can't farm. And then the second year, I think it was 80%, the third year is 50%, and then it's 25% the fourth year, and then the fifth year, they don't pay you anymore. They get to use your land in perpetuity, indefinitely. But I could not find anywhere on the transit for the easements on how much a farmer would be paid per year. I couldn't dig it up, could never call anybody there. Nobody ever answered my calls. I actually tried to call the reporters and those numbers at the website to get more information before the broadcast here. That's how much I really want to know about what's going on. But over on Ag Week, they talk about the 1,300 miles. And again, this is where the information's coming from the ethanol and the fertilizer plants to these sequestration sites. So remember, you got to have compressors along the entire way. You need to keep that cool enough. So the amount of infrastructure and the amount of electricity to run this transit program is just astounding in itself. I don't even know how they can come with a straight face and say this is the project to save the environment. A surging national debt is bullish for gold. The debt ceiling drama ended with nominal budget cuts and a shiny new credit card with no limit for the federal government. The first business day after the U.S. Treasury increased our national debt by $350 billion. It's no wonder Google searches for how to buy gold hit record levels in 2023. Call the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Patriot Gold Group has the No Fee for Life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver on qualifying rollovers. Also, Patriot Gold Group, Consumer Affairs top-rated IRA gold dealer, 6 years in a row. Give them a call, 888-546-7020. And now on with the video. When it's going to eclipse, oil and gas and the amount of, things that they would need, it's equivalent or higher than it would be for liquefied natural gas to run down pipes. Because LNG is already coming out liquefied in some areas, and they keep it at that cool temperature to run it. This is literally taking the gas after the process and recapturing it and trying to squeeze it and re-liquefy it. It's a different kind of process altogether. So the Iowa Farmers Union on top of this, and they should be, and I'm trying to bring some awareness to it also because I have a farm, and it would irk me to no end if this company came in and did the same thing on my land and said, no, we're going to run through your orchard out there. We get to run right through it and destroy all the trees. And by the way, we need 75 feet that way, 75 feet that way, 50 feet in the middle. I don't care if we went through your fruit orchard. We're a private company. We can tell your politicians to tell you what to do. And that's exactly what's happening. So the Iowa Farmers Union, they oppose the use of eminent domain to facilitate any of these 3 carbon dioxide pipelines. And see, now it's a cash cow, and everybody's in on it because the amount of money in this carbon capture storage underground is just ridiculous. So they're trying to get the utility boards to say, ixnay on the use of eminent domain for pipelines because they're non-public usage, public utility. They're private companies. And this is where some counties are really taking it into, fervent. They're like, you're not coming in. Now, this is the Summit Carbon Project, which is a different one than the one I just showed you there with the Greenway, the Heartland Greenway Navigator. This is a different company with a different set of pipeline projects. So there's 2 ongoing. This one's going to be 2,000 miles of pipe. Same exact thing. Everywhere you see the blue dot is the initial where they want to set up for the sequestration underground storage facility and pumping underground. But those white dots is their expansion plans, the trunk lines as they call it. So you can see how much they're planning to put underground, which scares me a little bit. I mean, you're talking about refilling the earth with a substance that's not ever in our earth to be refilled with. They could say that they want to use it in tertiary recovery for oil operations where, like the Saudis do, they pump seawater down in their wells to make the oil float up, and then they recover the oil that way. They're putting more seawater down in their wells now, that Saudis are, than they're actually getting oil out every day. So maybe they put 13 million barrels of oil seawater down in a well, and they might get 10 million out. Like they've reached peak production in quite a few producing areas in Saudi Arabia. But the same thing here, they're saying, well, we could use some of the CO2 to push down in our wells that have passed their peak production. And again, secondary and tertiary recovery, where they're going to start pushing all this liquefied CO2 down in hopes that the oil will stay on top. So we'll see where that goes. But these proposed pipelines and those in the way through these different counties are saying, hey, we have county ordinances that you can't have this next to a school. You can't run it through a church. You can't run it through, a wetlands area. Because a lot of these farmers up here had bogs that were allowing them to get tax breaks because they had a green belt themselves. But they wanted to put these pipelines right through the areas that are protected zones environmentally anyway. Like, what kind of grift and scam is going on here to lay these pipelines down? And then why is carbon dioxide liquefied and pressurized? How is that safe? Well, liquefied CO2 obviously allows for more efficient transportation over long distances. They're talking thousands of miles from, I took it out of this fertilizer production facility. Now we need to send that liquefied CO2 1,000 miles down where they're going to put it under the ground. Talk about a scam here. I really look at this in a molecular level. I mean, yeah, it's inert. It's not going to explode. You're not going to have a leak. If it breaks, it'll turn back into CO2 again. But the nitty gritty comes down to something like this. The carbon removal credits is what we're really familiar with right now. It's all about planting the trees, this kind of thing, carbon credits. I'll plant a forest on my property that was pasture land, and as it grows, they know how much each tree species will sequester in a year, and then they'll do the average using LiDAR when the satellite and measure that, and then the landowner would get the carbon credit like myself, and I'll get $8 to $18 approximately at today's rates. And then somebody could buy that from me, like a company would go, David, we want to buy that. We want to look like we're helping the environment. You're planting trees, we're cutting them down. We want to buy your trees. So here's the carbon credit, and they switch it over. Now that's the mechanism today. But the other carbon credits is going to be a CDR. And this is where they actually take that, extract it from a process and put it underground. Now, these are two things. You're going to start to hear about this more. And removing CO2 from the atmosphere, which is way different than an offset. These are completely two different animals, but they're being sold as the same thing right now, because you won't realize, and I didn't either until I looked into the massive amount of infrastructure, the massive amounts of money, and the massive amounts of people that would be moved off of lands to make way for these projects. That's what they don't want you to see. And you will own nothing, kind of, look it out going, if they continue down this road, they could deem everywhere off limits. Oh, we need to put a pipeline here. There's a habitat project there. So carbon dioxide removal, CDR, is what you're going to look for. And carbon sequestration underground storage, CCUS, is the second thing. Now, also, what is not being talked about, but is in all of the 2050 documents, America signed, John Kerry made us agree, put agreements for the United States, plugged us into this 2050 agreement. And if you really want to do more research, it's the SBTI targets, which I did. I'll show you a couple charts here. Now, unbeknownst to most of us, every company needs to shift after 2030 to the carbon dioxide removal underground storage units. So this interim stage here of replanting trees to offset the CO2 from a company polluting the environment is only going to run through 2030. After that, it's going to switch systems where you're going to have to capture every molecule, liquefy it, and send it. That's the bait and switch. And that's the difference here. And all companies will need to make that transition by 2030 into the new system. So if you're holding on to the carbon credits thinking that you can hold on to those for a lifetime and store family wealth, they're only going to be good through 2030, and they'll have to switch. Now here's the thing, diving a little deeper into it, Navigator, that one with Heartland Greenway, partners with Puro Earth to generate and be the market leader of the issuance of these new, look at it again, carbon dioxide removal credits. They're starting a brand new market with these two companies, with these two pipeline projects as the initiator and the spearhead to bring in this new system to show there's value behind it. And I thought, well, when did they even get this thing started, by the way? So the new market, you got to check these companies out, Puro Earth and Navigator, and then they're also tapped into a few other NGOs, which are all financed. And if you look at that money trail, where does it come back to? Same places, World Economic Forum. It's all like a tight-knit club with all these different things that don't seem like they're matching and mixing, but the loop's right back in there. So carbon dioxide removal credits. Now you're going to have to validate, and it'll be strategic partnerships built on, and you can hear it again and again, these same keywords used. These are the industries that will have to abide by, and we in the United States have been railroaded into by John Kerry already. These binding agreements, which are not laws, by the way, they are binding, but they're not lawful. There's a huge difference. So the mix of sectors, you can go through all these different sectors from the building to the industries, transportation, energy, and then you break it down into flag. That's the different type of agriculture and commodities involved in agriculture, including fertilizers and this sort of thing. Animal husbandry is all in that flag pathway. Commodity pathways is any commodity you understand through mining or any type of commodity that's sold as a commodity. Even lumber would fall under that, but that falls under flag also. So water would be a commodity. And then we get into the service buildings, and then, residential buildings. That's our houses. And that's going to be bound into this 2050. So any CO2 produced in whatever you use in your house, I don't know how they're going to do it, but they're going to force you to use some service to capture that CO2 for any process in your house. Well, everything's going to be over to smart grid, smart meter by then, so it'll pretty much be electrically driven, because you see how they're trying to do away with gas stoves? That's because you'll be outside of that, and you won't be able to capture that methane or whatever gas is CO2 coming out of your natural gas stove or your propane burner. See, that's why they're trying to get everything to electric, because then they can meter it at the source. So wherever the electric is produced, that tax will be associated with you in your consumption. So that is going to be a carbon add-on tax that will pay directly to these companies that are liquefying it and sending it to an underground storage facility. All by law. Well, binding mandate. People are going to start standing up against this eventually. Residential buildings, you come to the people's houses and say, well, you got to pay double for your electricity because you got all these associated carbon underground storage taxes with it. And then we got iron, steel, cement, chemicals, railroad transportation, maritime, aviation, oil and gas, power generation, and every part of your life is touched into this. And see, these are the things that are hidden in the 2050 agenda moving forward. We're jumping the shark on this. And Bloomberg hit it on the head. This is a great article. I encourage everybody to read this here. Companies keep climate goals secret as green hushing takes off. So I went over to see who was involved with this. There's 560 major companies involved with the 2050 agendas. Of course, they want to keep it quiet because they don't want you to know their companies are in conjunction with this and are absolutely at the end of it going to force every single human to pay these taxes for underground storage of CO2. They call it greenwashing and they're like green hushing and they don't want to be associated with it because if you get into the real nitty gritty of the 2050 plans, you're going to be just shaking your fist going, I'm never buying another thing from them. And BASF was the very first one to sign on as the first signatory, if that tells you anything. So the global electricity for CO2 emissions, where's the electricity going? Down, 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 the available electricity. So how much, in a real question here, how much infrastructure are you going to need to build to capture that much CO2 release out of each electrical facility to be able to make those curves actually fit? Excuse me. We're going to have to revamp the entire world with a new set of copper wiring literally around the planet. This will encompass every nation, every power plant, every factory, every ship, everything that is used across the planet now will need to have now a ride along, sit along next to device to capture the CO2. So you can obviously, electrical generation is going to go because if I was, let's say I have an electrical plant and it would cost me $100 million to install that new capture technology, what's the ROI on it? Maybe I'm a smaller provider. There's no way I can afford that, even if I were to go out and get some available capital. So a lot of these electrical producers, the small teapots as they're called, are just going to cease, which will cut more electrical supply out of that whole equation. And you'll be left with the majors only that can afford the sequestration technologies and equipment. We're talking trillions with a T of new infrastructure that needs to be built to ride along with this 2050 agenda. Not me or you that's going to make that money. It's the corporations. It's the transference of wealth. Second, this Heartland Greenway, I wanted to get into the actual meat of it here. The tax credit sparks a gold rush. And I thought, as soon as I saw that, I knew these guys, what are they going on here? It's all about the money. So involved in these pipeline projects is called 45Q. And that is an IRS tax code, 45Q, that allows any types of carbon sequestration or storage underground to receive a $31.77 per ton for geologically sequestered CO2 per ton, and then $20 per ton if used in oil recovery. Okay, how much money is that really? Because then they give you some numbers here on this. So this is stage one of the Heartland Greenway project. Will, in the very beginning, the first year of this thing, sequester 15 million metric tons every year for that, operating every day. And then from that point, they're going to expand their trunk lines out and start to add capacity for that. So I did the math down there on the bottom for you. So if we have 15 million metric tons of CO2, now the ranges were between say $23, which I'd seen for the regular carbon tax credits, all the way up to 31. So I thought I'd meet you in the middle and go $25. It's an easy one. Take those two averages, blend them pretty much in the middle at $25. That's $375 million of tax credit paid back to that company every single year. Because once the infrastructure is paid for, that's like a cash cow, no pun intended, with the methane there. And then you look forward, I was like, there's got to be information on this. So I went to the IRS itself, Congressional Research Service, and of course they do, they have this on record, Section 45Q. Now, this was in 2020. That's where that $31.77 per ton came from. But that's going to increase to $50 by 2026. And I thought that's way before the 2030 where they're even required to switch over to the new CCUS underground storage. Then they're going to increase it to $35 for geologically sequestered. And you know how it keeps coming up, it keeps bumping up. And here's the kicker. Here's the newest one from the International Energy Agency, which just put out in April of 2023, their updated prices, $85 a ton. So then I go, all right, well, the ton, I did the math with that, 375 million at $25 a ton. Look at that now, $85 a ton. That puts it 1.275 billion per year of recurring revenue for that same company. And all they're doing is taking the CO2 from a process. Governments are going to force you to pay those taxes to cover that expense for those companies. And that's only one project of the two. And how does that bring me back to seaweed once again, do you think? Because if you go right here to this one, I dug into the report. Ocean afforestation is a potentially effective way to remove carbon dioxide. And I said, no, we just got railroaded into it again. They want to force cows to eat the seaweed. But then there's going to be carbon credits and carbon offset credits for reforesting the ocean floor to produce seaweed. But the mandates are coming from governments to say that you need to give these cows methane blockers. You need to give the cows, you need to make them eat seaweed. See how backhanded and just, like I say, grifting it is? Nobody really cares about the environment. What they care about is confiscating and moving wealth from one point of our planet to another. Siphoning wealth of the entire global population under the guise of a fake CO2 emergency, climate emergency. As I said in the beginning of the show, if you understand it is a natural cycle, all of this stops. All of that goes to zero valuation. Those billions up in smoke, literally up in gas, never to be seen again. And it does roll. It keeps rolling. Now, the next thing you'll see, here's the July ozone depletion. The darker the blue it is, the more ozone's depleted out of the column. Remember, this is a natural cycle. Happens every year, but because the ice crystals from the volcanic eruption back at 2022, it's depleting much faster. The right side is where we are this year. Before the eruption was where we normally would sit on the. They're going to blame this on you also. So we can see where it's going to run away to. And if we all have enough knowledge and information, perhaps we can stop this madness of forcing farmers off the land, forcing these different taxes on you, forcing you to reduce your lifestyle, forcing you to live as a serf, go without basic amenities. You know, all the slides are there with the titles. So if you want to do more research and, you know, share this with friends and family, you can do that to bring more awareness for all of us. David Dubine, Mini Ice Age Conversations, signing off. See you next time. Bye for now.